This is Sarah, and welcome to my crochet channel. Today's video I'm going to be showing you how to crochet in single crochets a graph pattern. Now this graph pattern is really simple, and you can go to my blog and get the graph pattern. You can just click on it and copy and paste and print that off if you want to, or you can just use it by looking at it online. But you'll see it has numbers on the bottom and on the sides for your rows and stitches. It's very simple. It's 3 colors, the white, the green, and then the gold. And then it's trimmed in red like you can see on this one. And this just makes a nice little 5x6 inch washcloth or coaster. You can make several of them and put them together, add them to a pillow or a purse or a scarf. They would make nice pockets on a sweater or a scarf as well. So there's lots of things that you can do with this. So what my goal in today's video is to teach you how to read the graph, how to change colors neatly, and really just single crochet up a simple graph pattern coaster. So what you're going to need to make this coaster is you're going to need the graph, or you can go and just look at the blog at the same time that you're working the graph. You don't have to print it off if you don't want to. Alright, the next thing you're going to need if you print off the graph is something to mark your lines, and I like to use a Sharpie that's in yellow or maybe a highlighter, and as I work the row I'll just mark off that row. Actually, we're going to be working from the bottom up, so mark the rows off, and that just helps me keep track. We're going to be stitching today with our H hook, which is a 5mm crochet hook, and you'll also need a needle for weaving in your ends. Alright, so let's talk yarn. This one is made with worsted weight number 4 acrylic yarn. These are all the sparkles that you get from I Love This Yarn, and then I've got a little bit of Vanna's Choice for the gold because we didn't have a sparkle. They need to make a gold sparkle for me. But if you're going to use this for a washcloth or coaster, you might want to use cotton, and that's what I'm going to use today. So you're going to need a green for the Christmas tree. I've got a little bit of cotton here that has a little bit of sparkle in it. For the trim, I'm going to use this yellow cotton for the stem of the tree and the top, and then the star. And then you'll notice I have 2 balls of white cotton. And that's because as we work the graph, it makes it a little bit easier to use 2 separate balls to work it, because you're going to be working on one side and then the other as we move up. And rather than carrying your yarn across, it's neater if you have 2 separate balls of yarn. And if you only have 1 ball of yarn, you can just ball it into 2, or if you have a cake maker, you can do it that way as well. And we'll talk more about that as we get started on our pattern. Alright, so go grab your yarn, get you a highlighter, copy off that graph, and we'll get started. Alright, let's talk about the graph just a little bit. Now the graph has numbers on the bottom and numbers on the side. The numbers on the bottom are our stitches. When we begin, we'll make a chain of 18 chains, and then we'll begin in the second chain from the hook and stitch 17 single crochets. And then the remainder of our project will only be 17 stitches across. The numbers on the side are our row numbers. And so for each row, we have a number. And then we have all these blocks, and each block is a single crochet. Alright? And so we'll have 17 stitches across, and we'll actually have 17 rows because we are counting this row right here as well. But that's why I put the little gold thing there. We're actually going to have 17 rows, even though it says 16, because we're going to be stitching that first row where the numbers are. Alright? And like I said, each block is a single crochet across. And I'm going to show you how to change colors as neat as we can be. Sometimes it's hard to be a little bit neat when you're doing the graphs, but I'm going to show you how I do that to keep it a little bit neater. And also, as we go, I'll show you how to read the graph, because when we work the graph, we're single crocheting across, and then we're going to turn our work and single crochet across again and turn your work. And so you'll basically be reading it back and forth, like back and forth each row. But don't worry, you're going to get this. It's super easy, and this is a super easy pattern to do. Alright, so we're going to start with our white yarn. I'm going to make a slip knot, and then I'm going to chain 18 chains. Now I want you to notice that my chains are just a little bit loose. And that's because we don't want the end of our graph to pull in a little. We want it to be nice and loose. Alright, now don't make them too gapey, but don't make them too tight either. It's kind of a in-between. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to stitch this first row where these numbers are. Alright, so we're going to go in the second chain from the hook. This is our first chain, this is our second, and we're going to stitch a single crochet. So we go in the chain, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through both of those loops. And we're going to do this in each chain across. And when we get to the end, we should have 17 single crochets. Alright, last one. I'm going to chain one and turn. On each row we will be chaining one and turning, and the chain one does not count as a stitch. Alright, so I did this first row, so I'm going to take my marker and I'm just going to draw a line through this row. That tells me I've completed that row, so I don't get confused. Alright, now on this next row we're going to be doing white, 3 gold or brown, whichever color you've chosen, and then we're going to end with the white again. So I want you to have your gold ready and your other ball of white ready. Alright, let's do row 2. So for row 2, which is actually row 1, because this is our foundation row, so we're going to be on row 1. It seems a little confusing, but this first row was our foundation row. Alright, so we're going to stitch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 single crochets in white. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and now I've got my yellow ready, because on our 7th white single crochet we're going to put our hook through. We're going to pull up the loop, but we're not going to finish it. We're going to go ahead and bring in our color, because we're going to do 3 single crochets for the stem. I'm going to bring my yellow in on those last 2 loops, snug that white down. There we go. Make sure I get the right tail. And now we're going to stitch our 3 gold or brown, whichever color that you're using there. Alright, so now, oops, there we go. Make sure we snug that down so we don't have that loop too big. 1, 2. And now we're on our third stitch right here. So I'm going to just do the first part, do the loop, and now I'm going to join in my second ball of white yarn. Snug those down. We finished that third stitch of the yellow with the white, and now we're going to do the 7 remaining stitches of white using the other ball of white yarn. There we go. And chain 1. Now, as you're working, you're going to have yarn tails, and you're going to have yarn that you have worked in the back. But that's okay. You just have to take it slow and watch. But you'll notice when we did our color changes, we finished it with the next color. If we didn't do it that way, the loop that's right here in our yellow would have been white, and the loop that's right here in our white would have been yellow, and it would have been a little bit messy. Alright, so that's how we do row 2. And I'm going to, or actually row 1, because this first row was our foundation row, and I'm going to take my marker and just mark that row off. And that's the way that it should look at row 1. Alright, just to clarify one more time, the row with our numbers on it was our foundation row, and we stitched row 1, and now we're going to stitch row 2. So we're going to turn our work, and what you need to do is just be really careful. Pull your strings out so they're not in your way, and you have to establish your back, and this is the back of my work, so make sure all your strings are in the back. Alrighty? Alright, so now we're going to do row 2, and it's just like the row 1, so we're going to stitch right in that first single crochet and stitch 7 just like we did on the previous row. Alright, here is our 7th stitch. We're going to bring this to the back, and we're going to grab the yellow because that's where we ended on this side, and loop that on our hook and pull it through those 2 loops from the stitch 7. Alright, make sure those are snug down. And now we're going to stitch those 3 single crochets in yellow. Here's our third one. We're going to bring our string to the back, and we're going to grab that white one we ended with on that side, pull it through those 2 loops, snug everything down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we'll go right in that 7th stitch. And 7. Chain 1 and turn. Alright, so there's our little stem of our Christmas tree. Get my strings out of the way, take my marker, and mark that row. The main thing to keeping neat and tidy on a crochet graft pattern, a single crochet graft pattern, is marking your rows. Make sure you do your color changes well, and make sure you chain 1 at the end of each row. Alright, so we're done with our yellow for right here, so we can go ahead and clip that off, and that just gets it out of the way for now, since we're not going to need it until we get to the top of our Christmas tree. Alright, but we are going to be joining in our green on this row, because if you'll notice, we have 2 stitches on each side. Now we're not stitching in this row, so let me make a line there so you understand that. We're going to have 2 white single crochets, then we'll have all these green ones across, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and then we'll have 2 on this side. Alrighty, so don't worry about these yellow ones. We'll weave those in when we're all finished. Now you will still need 2 different white balls, and that way we're not carrying our yarn across the back of our Christmas tree. Alright, so on our graph it shows us to only stitch 2 single crochets. So we've chained 1 and we've turned. We go right in that first one, stitch a single crochet, go right in the second one, and stitch, oops, we don't want to finish it because we want to add in our green. There we go. Snug those down. Where's my green one? There we go. Or my white one. Make sure we get that first loop too. Alright, so now we're going to stitch green single crochets all the way across. I believe it was 13 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I'll stitch those across. Alright, so there's my 13. I've got 2 white stitches. I'm going to grab the white on this side, pull it through those last 2 loops of the previous stitch, and then stitch my last 2 single crochets. Chain 1 and turn, and that's the way that it should look at this point. I've gone ahead and marked my graph because we completed that row. I chained 1 and turned, and now I'm on the back of my project. And we're going to be stitching rows 4, 5, 6, and 7 exactly the same as we did row 3. We'll have 2 single crochets in white at the beginning. There's 1 and 2. Pull your yarn to the back of your work and bring up your green to finish off that single crochet, and then we'll stitch green single crochets for 13 rows. I'm sorry, 13 stitches, not rows. So we've got 13 green single crochets across for the bottom of our Christmas tree. Okay, here is my last green single crochet. We're going to pull the green yarn to the back and grab that white one and finish that single crochet, and then, oops, there we go, single crochet in the last 2 single crochets, chain 1 and turn. Alrighty, and we will repeat that. That was row number 4, so I'll mark that off. And then we'll repeat that for 1, 2, 3 more rows. It gets us up to row 7. I have finished up through row 7 with the 5 rows of the green. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now you can see on row 8 we're going to do it the same. The only difference is we're going to have 3 white single crochets, 11 green, and then 3 white. So I've chained 1, I'm going to stitch 1 single crochet right in that first one and then in the next 2. Alright, but we're not going to finish that one because we're going to bring in our green. There we go, and then we're going to stitch 11 single crochets in green. We stitch those 11 single crochets. We're going to pull our yarn to the back, grab in that white, finish that 11th single crochet, then we'll stitch in the last 3 single crochets. There we go. Chain 1 and turn. And what you're going to see now is we're going to start bringing in our Christmas tree to get that shape. Alright, so we finished row 8, and you'll notice row 9 is exactly the same as row 8. So we'll stitch 3 single crochets in white, changing to our green. Oops, that out of the way. Alright, and then I'll stitch those 11 single crochets. There we go. There's our 11th one. We're going to switch back to our white and stitch the last 3 in white. And chain 1. And this is how it should look after row 9. And something you'll begin to notice is that your balls of yarn might get a little tangled. And what I do is I just kind of pull a big loop, and then I take a few minutes and untangle my balls of yarn. So I marked my 9th row that we did, and now we're going to do 10 and 11, which are just alike. The difference is we have 4 white squares, then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 green, and 4 white, and we're going to stitch that for 2 rows. Alright, so we're going to turn our work. And we'll stitch 1 single crochet in the first 4 using our white yarn. And now I'm to the 4th one, so we're going to not finish. Pull our yarn to the back and bring in our green. Alright, so now I'm going to stitch those 9 single crochets, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now on the 9th one, we're going to pull our yarn to the back and grab in that white. There we go. And then we'll stitch in that last green one, and then we'll stitch 3 more, so we have 4 white ones on each end. There we go. Chain 1 and turn. And now we'll go ahead and mark off row 10, and then we'll just repeat what we just did. Four white ones, then we'll bring in the green, and we'll stitch 9 green, white, and stitch 4 white single crochets. All right, so that brings us up through row 11. All right, for row 12 and 13, we're going to be stitching 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 white single crochets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 green, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the white. So we've chained 1 and we're going to turn. One, 2, 3, 4. Make sure your strings are to the back. There's 5, and then our 6th, we're going to bring our string to the back. There we go, and grab up our green. Finish that single crochet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bring that yarn to the back and grab in our white. There we go, get around that hook. All right, then we'll stitch in those last 6. 1, 2, 'All right, there's our 6th. Chain 1 and turn. Let's get a little more yarn out here. And then we'll just repeat what we just did. 6 white single crochets, 5 green, and 6 white. We completed rows 12 and 13. And now we're going to do row 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the white single crochets, 3 green, and then 7 again on that end. And we're only going to do this one time. The next row we'll add that gold back in, just so that it's gold underneath. And then I'll show you when we're done how to add the little crosshatch star. All right, so there's my 7th, so I'll bring my yarn to the back, grab up my green, there we go, stitch those 3, 1, 2, 3, pull the green to the back and grab back up that white, right in that one green stitch, and then stitch those remaining 6. Chain 1 and turn, but before we turn, we're going to go ahead and clip off our green yarn. And I always leave myself a pretty good sized tail for weaving in. All right, let's get the green out of there. I'm going to go ahead and grab my yellow and get it ready, because we're going to do 1 square of yellow on our next row. All right, so let's go ahead and mark off row 14. For row 15, we're going to go across. We're going to have that 1 gold block in the center, and then across again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 white, 1 gold, and then 8 white. We already chained 1. All right, so, oops. All right, we're in that 8th. So I'm going to bring in my yellow. There we go. And I'm going to stitch one yellow. Oops, we don't want to finish it because we want to bring the white back in. That's where it's a little bit. There we go. Snug those back in the back. And then we just go across. Alrighty. So there's row 15 with just that one gold block in the center. And we can go ahead and cut our yellow off. And you can actually go ahead and cut off this side white because we're just going to go straight across with the white. So chain one and turn, and we're just going to stitch one single crochet in each single crochet across with our white yarn. Now I used white yarn for my background. You could use a light blue, a lighter green maybe, or even gold. It's totally up to you how you want to make yours. That's the neat thing about crochet, is you can change up the colors however you want, and then you've got a brand new creation. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and chain one, and I'm going to go ahead and cut my yarn because we're going to do a trim using the red. But before we do that, I want to turn it over. Let's make sure we mark these off because we've already done them. There we go. And this is how it should look on your front side. And like I said before, we tried to make these as neat as possible, but they're not going to be crisp. That's just the nature of working with yarn and single crochets. But the most important thing about keeping a crisp look to your graph is when you do your color changes the way that we did, and also going ahead and using more than one ball of yarn, because if we would have stayed with just the one white, we would have had lines going across our green, or we would have had to stitch over it and it might peek through. Alright, now before we do our trim, I want us to do a little bit of weaving in of these ends to get it out of the way. And what I do with cotton yarn, sometimes it's hard to get it on your needle. And so I'll sort of fan out the end of it so it's flat, bend it over, and then I can get it on my needle. And remember, this is your back, and you want to keep your weaving in to the back. And I just go through the stitches, and I go one way, staying in the color that I'm working, so I don't have any yellow or white peeking through the green. And I usually try to go 3 times. One way, go back the other, and then back the other way. Alright, so I'm going to take a few minutes and weave the rest of these in, and then I'll show you how to add the pretty trim. So now I'm ready to add my trim, and I chose this cotton that I have on hand. It's got a little bit of a sparkle going through it, and I bought this a few years ago, and I believe it's by Bernat, so you could probably find it on their website. Alright, I'm going to take that loop out, put my hook in, and join in my red. And the outside trim is super easy. We're just doing single crochets. And so what we'll do is we'll place a single crochet in each of the stitches going across because we have stitches to go into. Then when I get to the corner, I'm going to place 3 single crochets in that corner. And that just helps it ease around the corner nicely. And now we're to the side. And we don't have stitches to go into, but we do have ends of rows. And what I try to do is put a single crochet in each of the ends of the rows. And I try to go in the stitches that's on the end, not the holes. Sometimes you'll have to go in a hole. That's, you know, totally normal. But I really try to go in the stitches and keep the stitches close together. You don't want them to be too separated where it looks gapey, but you don't want them, you know, so close that they're all clumped up. So it's going to have to be a little bit of eyeballing. We call that single crochet evenly down the side. You can see how that's looking. I like it. And if you want to, rather than just going ahead and putting on your trim, you can single crochet around the 4 sides with white and then add your trim if you would like to as well. I just don't. It's, you know, a preference again. Alright, we're to the corner, so I'm going to stitch 3 single crochets in the corner. And I'm at the bottom of the work, so I can stitch my stitches right in those chain stitches that we started with. And I'll just stitch across these chain stitches, put 3 single crochets in the corner, and then work right up that other side. So I've single crocheted on all 4 sides. I've got 3 single crochets in each of the corners, and I'm at the last corner, and I'm going to add that second and then third, oops, lost my hoop, there it is, third single crochet, and then I'm going to join, get in there, to the first single crochet I stitched, and cut my yarn. And I'm going to go in the next stitch and pull that loop to the back. There we go. And that just gives it just a little bit better of an appearance so that you can't see where I tied off my yarn. Now, this looks like it needs just a little bit of blocking, which is totally normal when doing a graph. And to block it, you can just pin it on a blocking board, spritz it with some water, and let it dry. I have found they have a tendency to pull in a little here, but don't worry about that. That's a super easy fix. Now, the last thing I want to show you is how to make this little star right here. Alrighty, so we're going to take some of this gold yarn. We're just going to clip us off a good long piece, probably more than we need. Fan that out a little so we can get it on our needle. There we go. And we're just going to do a little, we're going to make an X and a line. So we're going to go behind. And we'll go right down in like that. So we've got a line. I guess it's not an X, it's a plus sign. And then we'll make the plus sign. And try to go in the stitches, not the holes, because if you go in the holes, you might lose your stitch. Okay, so they're like that, and then we'll just go in that stitch, and it's a little harder on cotton, and we'll just go across, and then we'll do the same thing this way. So I guess it is an X and a plus. And I did like that because I wanted it to have just a little bit of a 3D look. Can you see that? Alright, so we'll just go in the back there. We'll go ahead and cut that off, and I'll weave that in just a minute. And we also need to weave in these ends as well. But that's how to read a graph so that you can make a fun little Christmas tree coaster. And again, the things to remember is to know where your front and your back is so you can keep your tails to the back, to know how to change colors, and how to just read that graph back and forth. And this is a wonderful pattern to practice that on. So, this is my Christmas tree graph pattern. I hope you'll have fun with it.